Hi, I'm Stef. I'm a senior intel analyst on the Red Canary intelligence team.
Hi, I'm Tony Lambert. I'm a senior malware analyst on the Red Canary intel team.
And we are very excited to talk about this year's threat detection report.
Yeah, top 5 things that we want to talk about from the threat detection report.
And share with practitioners for this year.
First one. It's really, to just say it, of course, everybody knows. It's good to know your environment, but we're going to talk about it in a little bit more detail than just know your environment. Yeah, the fun thing from the year was that this really showed in a few different ways, and not just in like a software inventory fashion, but we ended up seeing this and talking with customers across multiple threats, multiple incidents. This became really relevant with ransomware incidents. This became really relevant in all sorts of intrusions over the year that we saw. Like, a good example was when we worked with folks that had just experienced ransomware incidents. One of the most common things that we ended up hearing, like on the incident calls, were, you know, what RMM tools do you use? Do you use ps-exec in your environment? All the different stuff like that. And it was kind of interesting to see like how many people really had answers to those and how many didn't.
RMM tools is a big one. We actually had an RMM tool hit the top 10 this year with Net Support Manager. I don't remember what number Net Support Manager was. So
it was high. It was high enough.
I think it was 6 or 7. Hijack Glitter changed everything at the last minute.
Yeah.
So,
it was high enough that it was static and it didn't change whenever new statistics stuff rounded out.
So we had an RMM tool hit the top 10 this year for the first time, so Net Support Manager, which we refer to as just Net Support Manager. We don't call it Net Support Manager RAT, like remote access Trojan, because it is technically a legit remote access tool, even if it's not used that way by adversaries. So we did see that, not so much with ransomware incidents, but it was a follow-on payload for a couple of our other top 10 threats, which I think is why it showed up this year.
Along the knowing your environment part, something that ended up also playing a role were the edge perimeter devices that ended up popping up where people knew maybe they had a VPN appliance, maybe they had other kinds of appliance, but they didn't necessarily know what versions they had, or they didn't necessarily know that there were patches that were required. And we talked to a lot of folks over the year where a Fortinet VPN appliance or something like that happened to be involved with an incident.
I was going to say, we saw a couple of vulnerabilities. I mean, we saw more than a couple, but particularly Fortinet vulnerabilities this year.
Confluence type stuff,
and so that's definitely another good reason. I want to go back to RMM tools because we didn't touch on the others that we saw for other kinds of incidents too. So with ransomware incidents, we would see things like ConnectWise, Screen Connect, AnyDesk, TeamViewer. RMM tools, they're pre-made. If adversaries can just take a thing and drop it into an environment and get access, especially if they can get somebody internally to deploy it for them, then it makes things so easy for them.
And like something that we've ended up seeing, talk about like it being pre-made, it blends in with the environment so well, where everybody has a vendor of some kind, and that vendor will use Screen Connect, and they will only ever use Screen Connect, and then they have another vendor that will only ever use TeamViewer. And so it's hard to standardize and try to have the appropriate exceptions in place. But when people can get all of that in place, it makes responding so much easier.
So much easier, absolutely.
Like our threat hunting team can go and instantly say, all right, we know anything that is not Screen Connect here is definitely malicious. Let's go after it.
And knowing your environment, it's not just your own on-prem environment, it's also cloud environments, which is very important. As things start to move more into the cloud, as we start doing more hunting in the cloud, detecting more threats in the cloud, adversaries are moving to the cloud as well, following people who are moving from enterprises. And so knowing your cloud environment is just as important as knowing your physical on-prem environments as well.
It's incredibly easy to like lose track of all the configurations that are in cloud things and try to govern all of those together. Like a lot of it goes out of sight, out of mind. And if people aren't looking at it every day, they just don't think that, oh, maybe my AWS instance has something weird.
And the bad guys take advantage of that. Another key takeaway that we want to talk about is make sure that your endpoints are monitored. Again, it sounds really basic, but some of the most serious incidents that we saw this year were due to unmonitored endpoints.
And I know it sounds weird hearing from a managed detection and response company like, hey, you need to have, detection response sensors on endpoints.
Right, like of course we're going to say that, but we're not saying that just because of course we're going to say that.
It's one of a fundamental thing. You can't detect what you can't see. And what we've ended up seeing over multiple different instances that we saw during the year working with folks was that we could really easily help organizations catch up to malware that were on covered endpoints, but adversaries knew that some endpoints wouldn't necessarily be covered. Like that's why, adversaries like to try to work with VPN appliances, try to land on those and pivot from those to go to different things. But anytime they could touch a Windows system or something else that does support a sensor, that was a really easy opportunity for us to be able to catch up and detect things if we have a sensor in the place. And so that was a big takeaway for several different organizations, because if they had all of this already in place, we could have helped so much faster, helped so much easier.
Absolutely, because they can get onto a system and do almost whatever they'd like. Recon, start their lateral movement process, make sure they've got the tools that they'd like to have in the environment. It's not ideal.
Can't detect what you can't see.
Exactly.
So for credential abuse stuff, this was something that really expanded from not just endpoint to identity and to cloud things, because credentials, I know there's a lot of folks that refer to credentials and identities as the new perimeter because everybody works from home, everybody works remotely. And previously 20 years ago, we would have those firewalls, we would have those edge devices that might help us out. But now everything is, people go and authenticate to SaaS apps, they go and authenticate to AWS, all these different things. So that was something that touched multiple things during the year where we could see where adversaries were really concerned with credentials. They were really concerned with trying to steal credentials from endpoints with stealer malware. We could see where they tried jumping into things with business email compromises, trying to use credentials into stuff like that. So it was really apparent how it affected multiple areas, multiple facets of detection.
It did. And by credential abuse, we mean valid credential abuse. So these are not credentials that they have created themselves. These are credentials they have been able to source one way or another, whether it was brute forcing their way into an environment, buying them from initial access brokers that have previously stolen them. It's surprising, and I noticed I was putting together the initial access tradecraft section of the threat detection report this year. And it wasn't just us. Other third-party teams also noticed a huge increase in initial access with valid credential abuse, especially for that VPN access. That was a very, very popular initial access vector for adversaries this year.
And I worked on the Steelers section for the threat detection report too. And that was a really big section for this year because we saw a lot of stealer activity over on Mac OS systems, and we ended up seeing a lot over on the Windows systems as well. A little bit of background noise for the year of the generic, we always see stealers, but then at the end of the year, things really popped up really high with those paste and run type incidents, like the fake captures and things like those.
Lunacy too.
Everybody and their brother is worried about a credential of some kind. They're trying to run after them. Scripts do evil.
Scripts do evil. So what does that mean when we say scripts do evil? We had 3 threats in the top 10 this year that start their evil by dropping scripts. And that's how they kick off their execution process on the system. And so that would be Scarlet Goldfinch and Sock Gaulish.
Gootloader.
Yeah. And then there's other threats that we also see over the course of the year that may not be in the top 10 this year, but like Saffron Starling is an example of one that we saw at the beginning of this year that made our monthly top 10. It just gives adversaries a really easy, I'm gonna say cheap way of coming in, because you can tweak a script a little bit, make it a lot harder to detect, and it just gives you an opportunity to go ahead, start your commands, download your payloads, whatever you want to do.
And like given the choice between, okay, let's learn how to program in C and make my own stuff versus, hey, let's use something that Microsoft or Apple already has on an endpoint, I'm definitely going to go with the stuff that's already there.
Scripts are small.
Like, it's easy to do. It's a lot easier than trying to figure out how to program and compile your own stuff. But the really good news about a lot of this is that it's kind of, I don't want to say easy, it's manageable. Possible for most organizations to do something about it. There are group policy objects. If you do policy-based management in Windows, like one of the most successful ways we've seen organizations get around these threats and try to like stop them in their tracks is just doing something as simple as changing the default file handlers in Windows so that instead of JavaScript and VB script files opening with their default file handlers, opening a notepad instead.
I love that. I love that mitigation technique. I'm so glad we did a whole blog on that on its own, because it's just so beautifully simple and it works really well. Does everyone in your org need to be able to open Visual Basic scripts? Does everyone in your org need to be able to open WScript, right off the bat?
And like one of the good things were through the miracle of group policy and through all of the policy-based management stuff, if you do have people in your organization that do need it, let's just manage those organizational units. Let's just get those policies in the right places and we can facilitate all of that.
And then you don't have to worry about, that's it. You don't have to worry about the payloads, what they're dropping. Like so often you can just stop their initial access loaders.
Right at the first sign of bad.
Feels so good. Feels so good. Just be like, no, denied.
Where do we start with browsers?
Oh gosh, there's so much browser stuff. We talked about browser stuff a lot already in our insights, intelligence insights over the course of the year. I think, let's start with fake updates. Fake updates, perennially popular, evergreen. There's still an issue. So things like, we talked about Golish already, we talked about Scarlet Goldfinch. They're taking advantage of users trying to do the right thing, right? To update their systems, to stay on top of those security updates, and instead give them malware, give them evil. It's surprising. I guess it's not surprising. It's still really effective. It's really effective.
For me, it's kind of interesting to see like how adversaries have moved past several years ago, we would see just an absolute ton of macro-based threats, things like those. And like a lot of adversaries have just adapted to the times where they can say, I know that these users are going to be doing everything in a browser, so let's just tell them we're giving them a fake browser update. Just something as simple as that. Or maybe I can try to do my malicious activities inside a Chrome extension, or maybe I'm going to go after stuff that's stored in a web browser.
I'm gonna take your cookies.
That was the cookies part was a good thing that we saw in the year where Google Chrome tried to do something different, try to protect cookies in Chromium browsers. Stealers adapted really quickly to it.
They did.
So like it really showed how fast that the Stealer market can adapt to changes. And it really showed like how important it can be for organizations to realize how much information is stored in browsers, like how much do your users store passwords like their Active Directory credentials in their web browsers where they authenticate to stuff? If so, maybe we need to find another password solution. Maybe we need to look at, one of the various password managers that are in the wild that may be more secure than storing in the browser, things like those.
Paste and run. Paste and run was the breakout initial access hit at the end of the year last year.
October, November.
And it's still really effective, and that very often presents itself in a browser as a web inject. Doesn't have to. It can also be email. There's a billion different ways that these paste and run lures are presented to people, but that has been extremely effective. Again, because especially for the fake captcha lure, kind of proving that you're human, where they end up copying and running the script behind the scenes they don't know about that the adversaries have kind of put into the process, and they get the users to be like complicit in their shenanigans.
And I like talking about like where users and folks have been trying to do the right thing, trying to apply the updates. This is a really good time for like folks to bring in a little bit of security awareness education, of like just letting people ask fundamental questions like, should my updates be given to me like this? Like, does my organization have a way that it's supposed to do our updates? Like, I know that when I get updates on my system here, it's not going to come from a random page on the internet telling me I need an update. I know that my security team is going to manage that.
It comes through a process.
It comes through a process.
Yep.
And so one of the trends that we did also see during the year is like, not just with this, but also with some of the, some of the social engineering around ransomware type situations. As soon as users applied that education, as soon as they started asking fundamental questions of, does my IT team do this? Or do we get updates in this fashion? Do we get any sort of management in this fashion? Adversaries really started getting frustrated, and they would go try to target other targets, because as soon as they knew that these users could talk back to them, they knew they were a lot less likely to get their targets. And it was really refreshing to me to see like some of the users not going gently into an incident like, all right, we're going to ask all the questions we can.
One of the things that I'm really excited about is we talk about so much more in the TDR, in the threat detection report, than we could possibly go into in just this conversation.
Yes.
So I actually have not seen the whole report. It's still in press right now. I'm excited to read it. I'm always excited to see what all of the insights are from across the company, because it's not just the Intel team, right?
Yeah.
There's so many people who have contributed sections.
Like threat research gets into it. Sometimes detection engineering, sometimes other folks get into it too. It's always fun to sort of see what each team, each flavor can see.
It is. It's going to be great.
Awesome.
And Threat Sounds.
Oh, yeah.
Threat Sounds Volume 5. It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be awesome.